What if everything you've been told about avoidant men is only half the story? People say they fear love. They say they run from commitment. But what if love isn't what they're running from at all? What if there's something they secretly crave even more than romance? Something so powerful that, once you understand it, their confusing behavior suddenly starts to make sense. Today, we're going beyond the myths, into the psychology of emotional avoidance, and uncovering what avoidant men often long for beneath the surface. And by the end of this video, you may never look at relationships the same way again. Have you ever noticed that two people can hear the words "I love you" and experience them in completely different ways? One person feels warmth, comfort, and excitement. The other feels pressure, uncertainty, or even the urge to pull away. At first glance, that reaction seems confusing. You might think, if someone truly wants love, why would they step back when it's finally offered? But here's what many people miss. Love and emotional safety are not always experienced as the same thing. For someone with avoidant tendencies, the need for emotional safety can be just as unimportant, sometimes even more immediate, than the desire for closeness. Think about that for a moment. Every human being wants connection. We are wired for relationships. We are wired to belong. Yet the way people protect themselves is shaped by their experiences, beliefs, and emotional patterns. Some move toward others when life gets difficult. Others instinctively create distance. That doesn't automatically mean they don't care. It often means they have learned that distance feels safer than vulnerability. One of the greatest lessons you can learn is this. People don't respond to love based only on how much they want it. They respond based on how safe they feel receiving it. That's a profound difference. Imagine trying to plant a seed in rocky ground. The seed may be healthy. The sunlight may be perfect. The rain may come at exactly the right time. But if the soil isn't ready, growth becomes difficult. Relationships work much the same way. Love is the seed, but emotional safety is the soil. Without that foundation, even genuine affection can struggle to take root. Now, this doesn't mean every avoidant man experiences relationships in the same way. People are individuals, not labels. Attachment patterns exist on a spectrum, and no single explanation fits everyone. But many people with avoidant tendencies describe feeling conflicted. They may genuinely enjoy someone's company, while also feeling overwhelmed by emotional intensity. They may care deeply while struggling to express it openly. Understanding that complexity can replace confusion with compassion, without ignoring the importance of healthy boundaries. Here's something powerful to remember. Pressure rarely creates trust. Trust grows through consistency, honesty, and respect over time. When someone feels emotionally safe, they are more likely to lower their defenses naturally. That doesn't happen because they're forced. It happens because their nervous system begins to recognize that closeness doesn't automatically lead to losing themselves, being judged, or being hurt. And here's where the lesson becomes personal. Because this isn't only about understanding someone else. It's about understanding yourself. How often have you looked outside yourself for validation? How often have you believed that if you could just say the perfect words, the perfect message, or become the perfect partner, someone else would finally choose you? That belief gives away your power. Your value doesn't depend on another person's ability to receive love. Their emotional readiness is not a measurement of your worth. Real confidence comes from creating emotional safety within yourself first. When you know who you are, when you respect yourself, when your happiness isn't completely dependent on another person's reactions, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing approval. You stop trying to force outcomes. Instead, you show up with authenticity, patience, and strength. People can feel that difference. Confidence without arrogance is calming. Kindness without desperation is attractive. Emotional stability creates an environment where healthy relationships have room to grow. Think about the strongest leaders you've ever admired. They don't earn trust by demanding it. They earn trust through consistency. They remain steady under pressure. They listen before they speak. They create an atmosphere where people feel respected. Relationships operate under the same principle. Emotional safety is built through repeated experiences that communicate. You don't have to pretend here. You don't have to fear being judged. You can be yourself. That doesn't mean accepting unhealthy behavior or sacrificing your own needs. Compassion and boundaries can exist together. You can understand someone's struggles while also expecting mutual respect. Healthy relationships require both empathy and accountability. One of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing intensity with intimacy. Fast emotions, constant reassurance, and dramatic highs and lows can feel exciting, but they don't necessarily build lasting trust. True intimacy grows more quietly. It develops through reliability, honest conversations, shared experiences, and the confidence that both people can express themselves without fear of humiliation or rejection. Transformation begins when you stop asking, "How do I make someone love me?" and start asking, "How do I become someone who creates healthy, secure relationships?" That single shift changes everything. It moves your focus from controlling another person's behavior to developing your own character. Because at the end of the day, the strongest relationships are not built on manipulation, pressure, or fear of loss. They are built on mutual trust, respect, emotional maturity, and the willingness to grow together. Love becomes meaningful when both people feel safe enough to be honest, imperfect, and real. And that's the challenge I want to leave with you today. Don't just become someone who gives love. Become someone who creates safety through integrity, consistency, and self-respect. When you develop those qualities, you don't just improve your relationships. You transform the way you live. Whether someone else chooses to walk beside you or not, you'll know you've built a foundation that no rejection can take away. That's where lasting confidence begins, and that's where genuine connection has the greatest chance to flourish. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to confuse commitment with giving up their freedom? They believe that choosing one person means losing themselves. They fear that getting too close will cost them their independence, their identity, or the life they've worked so hard to build. If you've ever encountered someone with avoidant tendencies, you've probably seen this struggle play out. From the outside, it can look like they're rejecting love. But often, the deeper conflict isn't between love and loneliness. It's between connection and the fear of losing autonomy. Here's the truth that changes everything. Freedom and commitment are not enemies. In a healthy relationship, they strengthen one another. Think about the most successful people in any field. Great athletes commit to years of disciplined training. Successful entrepreneurs commit to building a vision. Musicians commit to mastering their craft. None of those commitments make them less free. In many ways, those commitments create the freedom to become the best version of themselves. The same principle applies to relationships. Real commitment isn't a prison. It's a conscious choice to grow alongside another person while remaining true to who you are. Many people mistakenly believe that love means constant closeness, endless communication, and doing everything together. But healthy relationships don't erase individuality. They create space for two whole people to support each other's growth. Every person needs time to think, to pursue personal goals, to recharge, and to maintain a sense of identity. Wanting that space doesn't automatically mean someone doesn't care. For some people, especially those who highly value independence, personal space is how they stay emotionally balanced. That doesn't mean every desire for distance is healthy. Sometimes people use independence as a shield to avoid vulnerability or difficult conversations. It's important to recognize the difference. Healthy independence allows closeness and individuality to coexist. Emotional avoidance, on the other hand, can become a way of escaping intimacy altogether. Understanding that distinction helps us avoid oversimplifying people's behavior. Now ask yourself this question. Are you trying to build a relationship where someone feels trapped, or one where both people feel inspired to stay? There's a world of difference between those two approaches. When someone feels controlled, criticized, or pressured, they often become defensive. They may pull away, shut down, or resist even if they care deeply. Human beings naturally protect their sense of freedom. This isn't limited to relationships. Think about a workplace with a controlling boss. Employees usually do the minimum required because they feel forced. Compare that to a workplace where people are trusted, respected, and encouraged. They often contribute more because they choose to, not because they have to. Relationships work in much the same way. This is where emotional maturity becomes so important. Mature love doesn't say, "If you love me, you'll never need space." Mature love says, "I trust that we can be close while also respecting each other's individuality." That mindset removes unnecessary pressure and creates room for genuine connection. But here's the challenge. Many people try to hold on tighter when they feel uncertain. They believe that more texts, more reassurance, or more control will create security. Ironically, those behaviors often create the opposite effect. Confidence isn't about gripping tighter. Confidence is about knowing your value, communicating honestly, and allowing relationships to develop naturally. That doesn't mean accepting inconsistent or hurtful behavior. Healthy relationships still require communication, accountability, and mutual effort. Respecting someone's need for autonomy doesn't mean ignoring your own emotional needs. Both partners deserve to feel heard and valued. If one person's desire for independence consistently leaves the other feeling neglected or dismissed, that's something that should be discussed openly rather than ignored. Here's one of the most empowering shifts you can make. Stop measuring love by constant proximity. Instead, measure it by consistency, respect, honesty, and shared effort. Two people don't have to spend every waking moment together to build a meaningful connection. What matters is the quality of their interactions, not simply the quantity. Imagine holding a bird in your hands. If you squeeze too tightly, you hurt it. If you leave your hands completely open without any care, it flies away. But when you hold it gently, with strength and respect, it has room to breathe while still knowing it's safe. Healthy relationships require that same balance. Love isn't about possession. It's about stewardship. It's about choosing each other without trying to own each other. The strongest people understand that their happiness doesn't depend entirely on another person's presence. They continue pursuing their purpose, growing their character, and building a meaningful life. Ironically, that kind of self-confidence often creates stronger relationships because it removes the burden of unrealistic expectations. Instead of asking another person to complete them, they invite someone to share an already meaningful journey. And that's the lesson worth carrying with you. Don't build a relationship where either person has to disappear in order for the relationship to survive. Build one where both individuals become stronger because they're together. True commitment isn't the loss of freedom. It is the freedom to choose love again and again, without losing your identity, your purpose, or your self-respect. When two people can stand firmly on their own while walking in the same direction, they create a partnership that isn't held together by fear, obligation, or control, but by trust, mutual respect, and the shared decision to grow together every single day. Have you ever met someone who seemed deeply interested one day, then unexpectedly distant the next? One moment they were warm, engaged, and present. The next, they became quiet, unavailable, or emotionally hard to reach. That kind of shift can leave you asking painful questions. Did I do something wrong? Did they stop caring? Was everything they said a lie? Those questions are natural, but the answers are often more complicated than they first appear. One of the biggest misconceptions about emotionally distant behavior is the belief that distance always means a lack of feelings. While that can sometimes be true, it isn't true in every situation. Human behavior is complex, and emotional withdrawal can happen for many reasons. Some people step back because they've lost interest. Others withdraw because they feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or afraid of becoming emotionally vulnerable. Understanding that difference can help you respond with greater wisdom rather than reacting purely from emotion. Think about how people respond to stress. Some want to talk immediately. Others need time alone before they can process what they're feeling. Neither response automatically tells you how much they care. It simply reflects different ways of coping. The same principle can apply in relationships. Emotional distance doesn't always reveal the absence of emotion. Sometimes it reflects difficulty expressing emotion. Now, that doesn't mean every person who pulls away is secretly in love or just needs more time. It's important not to romanticize unhealthy behavior or assume hidden feelings without evidence. If someone consistently avoids communication, dismisses your needs, or treats you without respect, those actions matter. Healthy relationships require mutual effort. Understanding someone's emotional patterns should never become an excuse for accepting neglect or mistreatment. But let's explore why fear can sometimes hide beneath emotional distance. Imagine carrying an invisible backpack filled with painful memories. Maybe someone learned early in life that expressing emotions led to criticism. Maybe vulnerability was met with rejection, disappointment, or inconsistency. Over time, The mind begins to associate closeness with risk. Even when a safe relationship comes along later, those old protective habits don't simply disappear overnight. The brain often repeats familiar survival strategies long after the original danger has passed. This is something we all do in different areas of life. If you've ever failed publicly, you may hesitate before taking another risk. If you've experienced betrayal, you may become more cautious about trusting people again. Our past influences our present, even when we desperately want a different future. That's why it's so important to understand this truth. People often protect themselves in ways that no longer serve them. The challenge is recognizing that fear can wear many different masks. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like staying busy. Sometimes it looks like changing the subject whenever emotions become too personal. Sometimes it even looks like convincing yourself you don't need anyone at all. But beneath those behaviors, there may simply be someone trying to avoid getting hurt again. This insight isn't just about understanding others. It's about looking honestly at yourself. Ask yourself this question. What do I do when I feel emotionally threatened? Do you become defensive? Do you shut down? Do you avoid difficult conversations? Do you pretend everything is fine when it isn't? Every person has emotional defense mechanisms. They may look different, but we all have them. Growth begins when we recognize those patterns, instead of letting them control us. One of the greatest acts of courage isn't pretending you're fearless. It's choosing honesty even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. Real strength isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to move forward despite fear. This is where emotional maturity separates itself from emotional reactivity. When someone becomes distant, it's easy to panic. It's easy to assume the worst, bombard them with messages, or desperately seek reassurance. But reacting from fear usually creates more fear. Calmness, patience, and honest communication often create better opportunities for understanding. At the same time, patience doesn't mean waiting forever. Healthy love isn't built on endless guessing games. It's built on conversations, mutual respect, and consistent actions. If someone is unable or unwilling to participate in that process over time, it's okay to acknowledge that reality. Compassion and self-respect should always walk together. Here's another powerful truth. You cannot heal another person's emotional wounds through love alone. You can offer kindness. You can offer understanding. You can create a safe environment for honest communication. But lasting change happens when the individual chooses to face their own fears and take responsibility for their own growth. That's true for everyone. No relationship can replace personal healing. No amount of reassurance can permanently silence fears that someone refuses to confront within themselves. Real transformation begins when people stop running from their emotions and start learning from them. So instead of asking, why are they pulling away? Try asking a more empowering question. How can I respond with wisdom while staying true to my own values? That shift puts your focus back where it belongs, on your own character, your own emotional stability, and your own choices. Because here's what truly changes lives. When you stop chasing certainty from other people and start building confidence within yourself, you become less controlled by someone else's silence and more grounded in your own sense of worth. You stop interpreting every moment of distance as proof that you're not enough. Instead, you recognize that every person carries their own story, their own fears, and their own challenges. The strongest relationships are not built between two perfect people. They are built between two individuals who are willing to replace fear with honesty, assumptions with communication, and emotional walls with gradual trust. When people choose courage over avoidance, they give themselves the opportunity to experience the very thing they've been protecting themselves from all along. A genuine, healthy, and lasting connection. Have you ever noticed that the harder some people chase another person's attention, the further that person seems to drift away? It feels unfair, doesn't it? You pour in more effort, send longer messages, try harder to prove your love, and somehow the distance grows instead of shrinking. It's easy to believe that if you just care enough, if you're patient enough, or if you say the perfect words, you can convince someone to move closer. But relationships rarely work that way. One of the greatest lessons you can learn is that genuine attraction grows in an atmosphere of respect, not pressure. Think about the moments in your own life when someone tried to force you into a decision. Maybe it was a salesperson pushing you to buy something you weren't ready for. Maybe it was a friend demanding your time when you desperately needed space. Maybe it was someone constantly asking for reassurance even after you had already given it. How did you feel? Chances are you didn't feel inspired. You felt pressured. And pressure has a way of making people pull back, even when they originally had good intentions. The same principle often applies in relationships. When people feel that every conversation comes with expectations, demands, or emotional pressure, they can begin to associate the relationship with stress instead of peace. That doesn't mean your needs are unimportant. It simply means that the way those needs are communicated matters just as much as the needs themselves. Now let's be clear about something. Respect is not silence. Respect is not pretending you don't care. Respect is not accepting poor treatment or ignoring your own feelings. Real respect means honoring both your own boundaries and the other person's humanity. It means communicating honestly without trying to control the outcome. It means allowing another person the freedom to make their own choices while also recognizing that you have the freedom to make yours. This is where confidence changes everything. Confident people don't spend every waking moment trying to convince someone to value them. They understand that their worth isn't determined by another person's response. They express themselves honestly, they act with integrity, and then they allow reality to unfold. That kind of emotional strength is incredibly powerful because it removes desperation from the equation. Desperation has a way of speaking louder than words. It appears in constant texting without receiving replies. It shows up in sacrificing your own values just to keep someone interested. It whispers, if they leave, I'll never be happy again. But confidence tells a different story. Confidence says, I deeply value this connection, but I also value myself. I can love someone without losing who I am. That mindset creates a completely different energy. Imagine two gardens. In one, the gardener constantly digs up the seeds to check whether they're growing. Every day they interfere, worrying that nothing is happening. In the other garden, the gardener plants the seeds, waters them consistently, removes the weeds, and trusts the process. Which garden is more likely to flourish? Relationships are much the same. Constant pressure interrupts growth. Consistency, patience, and care create the conditions where trust can develop naturally. This doesn't mean you should wait forever for someone who isn't willing to meet you halfway. Healthy relationships require effort from both people. Respect goes in both directions. If only one person is investing while the other continually avoids communication or refuses accountability, that's not balance. That's emotional exhaustion. Respect also means respecting yourself enough to recognize when a relationship is no longer healthy. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they can love someone into becoming emotionally available. Love is powerful, but it cannot replace another person's willingness to grow. You cannot force someone to heal. You cannot pressure someone into trust. Lasting change always begins with personal choice. So what can you do instead? Focus on becoming the kind of person who naturally creates trust. Be consistent in your words and actions. Listen more than you assume. Speak with honesty instead of manipulation. Set healthy boundaries without anger. Stay calm during difficult conversations instead of reacting impulsively. Those qualities don't just improve your relationships, they transform your character. Remember, people are influenced more by what they repeatedly experience than by what they repeatedly hear. You can tell someone you're trustworthy 1,000 times, but if your actions don't match your words, trust won't grow. On the other hand, quiet consistency often speaks louder than dramatic promises ever could. There's another important truth many people overlook. Respect includes respecting another person's answer, even when it isn't the answer you hoped for. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is accept reality instead of fighting it. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Not every connection is meant to become lifelong love, and that's okay. Your value doesn't decrease because someone chooses a different path. When you truly understand this, you stop chasing validation. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly someone replies, how often they call, or whether they choose to stay. Instead, you measure your life by your integrity, your growth, and your ability to remain authentic regardless of the outcome. That's real strength. The people who create the healthiest relationships aren't the ones who demand love. They're the ones who inspire trust through consistency, respect, and emotional maturity. They understand that lasting attraction isn't built on pressure or persuasion. It's built on freedom, honesty, mutual effort, and the confidence to let love grow at its own pace. So don't waste your energy trying to force doors open that someone keeps closing. Become the kind of person whose character speaks louder than fear, whose confidence replaces desperation, and whose respect for both yourself and others creates space for genuine connection. Because in the end, the relationships that stand the test of time are never built through pressure. They's built through trust, and trust always begins with respect. Have you ever believed that if you could just love someone enough, be patient enough, or sacrifice enough of yourself, you could finally make the relationship work? Many people carry that belief deep inside. They think the missing piece is simply giving more time, more energy, more understanding, more chances. But sooner or later, reality teaches a difficult lesson. No matter how much you love another person, you cannot build a healthy relationship if you abandon yourself in the process. This is where everything begins to change. The strongest relationships are not built by people who are searching for someone to complete them. They are built by individuals who are committed to becoming whole themselves. Before you can create a secure connection with another person, you have to develop a secure relationship with yourself. Think about it. If your happiness depends entirely on someone else's attention, then every delayed message feels like rejection. Every disagreement feels like the end of the relationship. Every moment of distance becomes proof that you're not enough. That's an exhausting way to live because you've handed someone else the power to determine your emotional state. Real confidence doesn't come from hearing someone say, "I choose you." It comes from waking up every morning and saying, "I choose to respect myself." That choice changes everything. It changes the way you communicate. It changes the standards you set. It changes the people you allow into your life. Most importantly, it changes the way you respond when life doesn't go according to plan. Here's something many people never realize. Self-worth is not arrogance. It isn't believing you're better than everyone else. It's quietly knowing that your value exists whether someone recognizes it or not. It's understanding that rejection is not a verdict on your worth. Sometimes it's simply evidence that two people are not the right fit at that moment in time. Now, this doesn't mean personal growth is easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest journeys you'll ever take, because it forces you to stop looking outward for answers and start looking inward. It's much easier to analyze someone else's behavior than it is to examine your own fears, insecurities, and habits. But that's exactly where transformation begins. Ask yourself an honest question. When you're hurt, how do you respond? Do you immediately blame someone else? Do you lose yourself trying to earn their approval? Do you ignore your own needs because you're afraid they'll leave? Or do you take a moment to reflect, learn, and grow from the experience? The answers to those questions reveal more about your future than any relationship ever could. Imagine building a house on unstable ground. You can decorate every room with beautiful furniture. You can paint the walls and install expensive windows. From the outside, it may look perfect. But if the foundation is weak, the first major storm will expose every crack. Relationships work the same way. Romance is important, attraction is exciting, and shared experiences are meaningful. But without a strong inner foundation, every challenge feels overwhelming. That foundation is built through daily choices. It grows every time you keep a promise to yourself. It grows every time you set a healthy boundary instead of saying yes out of fear. It grows every time you choose honesty over pretending, courage over comfort, and growth over excuses. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they can heal another person's emotional wounds through their own sacrifice. Compassion is powerful, but it has limits. You can encourage someone, you can support them, you can create a space where honesty feels safe, but you cannot do their inner work for them. Healing is always a personal decision. The same is true for you. No relationship can heal wounds that you refuse to face within yourself. If you don't believe you're worthy of love, no amount of reassurance will permanently convince you otherwise. If you don't trust yourself, you'll constantly seek certainty from others. If you don't value your own life, you'll eventually expect someone else to carry the impossible responsibility of making you feel complete. That's too much pressure for any relationship to survive. Instead, become the person who inspires love by the way you live. Pursue your purpose. Invest in your health. Strengthen your character. Build meaningful friendships. Continue learning. Develop emotional resilience. The more complete your life becomes, the less you'll depend on someone else to fill empty spaces inside you. Ironically, that's often when healthier relationships begin to appear. Why? Because you're no longer operating from fear. You're not choosing people simply because you're afraid of being alone. You're choosing them because they genuinely align with your values, your vision, and your future. That's a completely different standard. And remember, personal growth isn't about becoming perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. Growth is about becoming more self-aware than you were yesterday. It's about recognizing unhealthy patterns before they control your choices. It's about taking responsibility for your reactions instead of blaming everyone around you. Every small improvement strengthens your foundation. Life will always present challenges. Relationships will always require effort. Misunderstandings will happen. Expectations will sometimes clash. But when you've developed genuine self-worth, those moments no longer define you. They become opportunities to communicate, learn, and grow instead of reasons to question your value. So, stop asking, how can I make someone choose me? Start asking, how can I become the strongest, healthiest version of myself? That question has the power to transform every area of your life. Because when you build your identity on character instead of validation, on purpose instead of approval, and on self-respect instead of fear, you create something no rejection can destroy. And from that place of strength, you don't just attract healthier relationships, you become capable of building them, nurturing them, and protecting them for years to come. That's the kind of transformation that lasts a lifetime. What if the greatest misunderstanding about love is believing that it's something you simply find? We grow up hearing stories about soulmates, perfect matches, and fairy tale endings. We're told that one day the right person will appear, everything will fall into place, and happiness will take care of itself. But life has a way of teaching a much deeper lesson. Love may begin with emotion, attraction, or chemistry, but lasting love is built through courage, commitment, and continuous growth. Think about any meaningful achievement in your life, whether it's building a successful career, mastering a skill, or creating a healthy lifestyle. None of it happened by accident. It required effort. It required patience. It required showing up on days when you didn't feel motivated. Relationships are no different. The strongest connections are not created by people who never face challenges. They're created by people who choose to face those challenges together instead of allowing them to drive them apart. This is especially important when emotions become complicated. It's easy to stay connected when everything feels exciting and effortless. It's much harder to stay present during misunderstandings, disappointment, or uncertainty. That's where courage enters the picture. Real courage isn't standing on a stage in front of thousands of people. Real courage is looking someone you care about in the eyes and speaking honestly about your fears. It's admitting when you've made a mistake. It's listening without becoming defensive. It's apologizing without making excuses. It's being willing to hear uncomfortable truths because you value growth more than protecting your ego. Many people believe vulnerability is weakness. They think showing emotion makes them less powerful. In reality, the opposite is often true. It takes very little courage to hide behind emotional walls. It takes tremendous courage to lower those walls and allow another person to see your authentic self. That doesn't mean sharing everything with everyone. Wisdom still matters. Trust is earned over time. But genuine intimacy becomes possible only when honesty replaces pretending. Now, let's be clear. Growth in a relationship isn't about changing your personality to keep someone happy. It's not about abandoning your dreams, your values, or your identity. Healthy growth means becoming a better version of yourself while encouraging the other person to do the same. It's about learning healthier ways to communicate, handle conflict, and support one another without losing your individuality. This is where many relationships either grow stronger or slowly fall apart. Some people expect love to remove every problem. They assume that if the relationship is meant to be, disagreements shouldn't exist. But conflict itself isn't the enemy. Unresolved conflict is. Two people can disagree and still respect one another. They can see life differently while remaining deeply connected. What determines the future of the relationship isn't the absence of problems. It's the willingness to solve them together. Imagine two people climbing a mountain. The journey isn't smooth. There are steep paths, unexpected storms, and moments when both feel exhausted. If one person insists on carrying the entire burden while the other refuses to help, the climb becomes nearly impossible. But when both contribute, encourage one another, and keep moving forward together, even the hardest sections become manageable. Relationships are built exactly that way, not by avoiding the climb, but by embracing it as a team. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is the habit of curiosity. Instead of assuming you already know why someone behaved a certain way, ask thoughtful questions. Instead of preparing your next argument while the other person is speaking, truly listen. Curiosity creates understanding. Understanding creates compassion. And compassion opens the door to solutions that pride could never find. At the same time, remember that growth requires accountability. Love is not a license to ignore harmful behavior. Compassion does not mean accepting repeated disrespect. Healthy relationships thrive when both people take responsibility for their actions, learn from mistakes, and make genuine efforts to improve. If growth exists on only one side, the relationship eventually becomes unbalanced. Now bring the focus back to yourself. Who are you becoming through your relationships? Are they inspiring you to become more patient, more confident, more emotionally mature? Or are they constantly pulling you into fear, insecurity, and self-doubt? Healthy love doesn't demand perfection, but it should encourage progress. The right relationship becomes a place where both people challenge each other to rise higher, without tearing each other down. Here's another truth worth remembering. Time alone doesn't strengthen relationships. Many people stay together for years yet never truly grow. Growth comes from intentional choices. It comes from conversations that matter. It comes from keeping promises, showing appreciation, forgiving sincerely, setting healthy boundaries, and refusing to let small resentments become permanent walls. Every day presents another opportunity to invest in the relationship you're building. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this. The quality of your relationships will rarely exceed the quality of your character. If you want trust, become trustworthy. If you want honesty, practice honesty. If you want respect, treat others with respect while refusing to abandon your own self-respect. The habits you cultivate within yourself eventually shape the relationships you create around you. So stop waiting for the perfect relationship to magically appear. Become the kind of person who is prepared to build one. Choose courage over comfort. Choose growth over fear. Choose honest communication over silent assumptions. Choose responsibility over blame. Because lasting love isn't created by luck. It's created by two people who wake up every day and decide that becoming better together is more important than being right, more important than protecting their pride, and more important than running away when life becomes difficult. That's where real transformation begins, and that's where genuine, lasting love has the opportunity to flourish.